What is up, guys? Welcome back to another GeekaWhat video. In this one, I'm going to be building a truly one-of-a-kind gaming PC build. With an open frame PC case, the world's most powerful gaming graphics card, and hardware that will make your eyes water and your bank account bleed, this is a build like no other. Buckle up and strap in. This one's going to be a bit of a roller coaster. Let's do this. I'm going to kick things off by walking you guys through all the components that make this build possible. And where else could I start than the case? The inspiration, shall we say, for the whole build today. Now this is the Thermaltake Core P3 Pro TG open frame gaming computer case. Whew, bit of a mouthful. Now this is a case like no other. You actually have to assemble this thing, which I've already done to save us some time, stop us from being here all day. It isn't that difficult to build, but it is a bit of a mission, and it kind of makes the whole PC building process that bit more rewarding. Plus, if that wasn't cool enough, this thing can also be mounted on a wall or on like a VESA compatible mount. They do monitor arms, there's loads of different things that support VESA mounts, making it a really nice one-of-a-kind system. Now, disclaimer alert, if you've got any children, animals, small or large, slightly nosy other halves, this is not going to be the case for you, as the fans at the front spin away, literally waiting for someone to stick a finger in and go, ow, that really hurt. So definitely a chassis for the enthusiast PC builder, and not a case to be put on the floor near anyone that can be harmed. Just genuinely something you might want to consider. Otherwise though, it's a really cool chassis. You've got an integrated vertical GPU mount setup that allows you to put 8 different PCIe lane attachments in here, so your graphics card's going to take up 3 in this case, but you still retain an extra one for a 10 gig networking port, sound card, anything you might want in a build, capture card for example, support for standard ATX motherboards, and loads of radiator mounting. So perfect build for water cooling. If you're going to do a custom loop, this might actually suit you very nicely. It's also great for airflow, which our graphics card is going to appreciate. This is the RTX 4090, most powerful gaming GPU on the market. Very expensive is how I would summarize this card in a few words. Ray tracing and DLSS performance is incredible. NVIDIA frame generation works well, and no matter how many different GPU graphs you look at, for any of the latest titles, this comes out on top. Of course, if you'd like to save some money, the cheaper 4080 or AMD's rival, the 7900 XTX, will also fit the criteria pretty well. What CPU could I pair up the most powerful graphics card in the world with, other than the most powerful gaming CPU in the world too? Nearly, sort of. This is Intel's Core i9-13900K, a chip that's only beaten out by the slightly more pricey 13900KS. The KS is basically a binned alternative to the normal K non-S, and also has 6 GHz clock speeds out of the box. But with some overclocking, this thing will more than compete. And the KS is a great choice, but definitely only for those of you looking at enthusiast level overclocking in a build like this. Motherboard wise, Motherboard wise, I've got the ASUS ROG Maximus Z790 Hero board, PCIe Gen 5, amazing overclocking support, and of course support for the latest DDR5 memory, making a great shout. ASUS's quick release for the graphics card is also really cool, so there's like a button you use rather than the fiddly clip, and the design aesthetic works well. Got a nice dose of RGB without being too overboard, and it of course matches the aesthetic of the ASUS GPU in this build too. For the RAM and SSD, I've got a DDR5 kit from Thermaltake, RGB and 6000 MHz for nice speedy performance, and a really cool stainless steel section, which you'll see in a moment, as well as a 1TB Seagate Firecuda 530. Read and writes of 7 to 8 GB a second on this make it one of the best options out there. Once again, not a cheap choice, but a really good one at that. Cooling and power also come in from Thermaltake to help make this build nice and cohesive. Toughliquid Ultra 360 provides a solid 360mm rad that also has the added bonus of a screen. Now, do you need a screen on your cooler? No, not really, but it can be a useful component on which to have a screen, as you can see valuable info like CPU temps, liquid temps, pump or fan speeds. So, you know, a little bit of a gimmick, but as long as it's decently executed, it can look nice. Power comes in from the Thermaltake Toughpower 1350. Of course, this is a build that is pretty wattage intensive, and although an 1200 watt unit would work well, 1350 isn't ludicrously more expensive than those cheaper wattage options on the market, and it's an ATX3 and PCIe 5 design. So as far as good power supplies go, pretty up there. Finally, fan-wise, I've got some of Thermaltake's Swafan 12 RGBs. These are actually really cool. Now, one thing case and fan manufacturers have been dealing with recently is that if you've got fans in an exhaust configuration, the blades and the RGBs are all on the wrong side. Corsair have countered this by doubling the RGBs and mirroring them, so you've got the same on the front as on the back. Thermaltake have gone a step further. You get 2 sets of fan blades with each fan, one for intake, one for exhaust, and you maintain perfect aesthetics, either orientation. I'd argue these are the best solution in terms of fans that look good from both sides, as although Corsair's options are nice, you still have that sort of scaffolding support mechanism at the back around the hub. This one will always look good no matter what orientation you install it. Otherwise though, I think we're basically there. It's time to actually assemble this system together, and where better place to start than getting the motherboard sorted. So that's the motherboard, CPU, RAM, SSD, and the prep for the CPU cooler. There is something oddly comforting about an Intel CPU socket. I'm just not used to the way that the AMD chips install yet. The socket just doesn't fill me with quite as much confidence by comparison. Pop the CPU in, nicely done. I talked about the memory briefly earlier in terms of the aesthetics, and you'll see what I mean when I open it out of the box. Now look at that, so good start so far. Definitely the best match on the market for the case, and that's why I've sort of gone quite heavy on the Thermaltake parts in this build, and why I'll do the same in a build with a Corsair case or a Cooler Master one. Everything in a build, you want it to match and be easily controllable through the same software suite, and that's what these parts are going to allow us to do. Push the clips back on second and fourth slots, pop the memory into place. Nice. He says, in theory, boom. Beautiful. Love how Thermaltake have integrated the RGB on this RAM as well, for good measure. Last major step is to add the SSD in. Now, thinking about it, this slot here doesn't make much sense to occupy as it's the PCI Gen 5 compatible slot. So instead I'm going to add it into here. I think there's M.2s under this shield as well. Not sure how you get that off. Just because if I add an M.2 that's a Gen 5 in later, I want the slot free to be able to do so. So small screwdriver is going to allow me to install this part. Nice and simple. For the cooler prep, I'm just going to take this back plate that says LGA 1700 on it, and then also these screws. So you can see here, it's got like a little bit of a thread, a big stopper, and then a big thread. Now, this is much easier to do now than when the motherboard's in the case. Although with this being an open frame chassis, it shouldn't be too difficult either time. Add the back plate into place like so. Flip your motherboard back round without the back plate falling off, and then add on each of these 4 posts. You can just do this with your thumbs. There's no need to actually need like a screwdriver or a specific tool. Can be a bit fiddly, as you're probably experiencing right now, but once they're on, they'll actually provide the basis for us to be able to install the CPU cooler without too many issues overall. So nice and simple. 1 post on each corner, a little something like so. The case then is the next part on the list, and typically I'd say you want to lay the case down flat, but something tells me that's not really going to work in this build. I think what I am going to do is just basically take off each of these silver stoppers at the end of the glass, as removing these will basically free the tempered glass panel to be properly taken off. Now, what I would suggest is taking off all of them apart from one of the top ones, as the bottom clips will hold it in at the bottom for you anyway, but as soon as you take that top one off, be prepared for it to fall over, like that. There we are, remove that. It is tempered, so technically it shouldn't mash, but it will definitely break if you're not careful. Also a couple of thumb screws, they are captive as well. There we go. Make sure all your thumb screws are nice and loose. Ah, I've missed one. This is the problem, you don't look at where they are. There we go, nicely done. And then it's a simple case of actually sliding and slotting the motherboard in. Now I say simple, probably going to be a bit of a challenge because it's a slightly unique chassis, obviously. But line her up, there we are, nice and easy. This might look a bit dubious, but once all the screws are in, it's not going to go anywhere and will hold more than firm. Cooler-wise, there's a few things to consider. So the radiator itself is going to go at the front, and then these really nice silent operation fans, which aren't RGB, are actually going to sit behind the radiator. For the front of the radiator, aka the bit that's on show, I've got Thermaltake Swafans. Now these are really, really cool. Let me show you briefly how these work, because I think in this instance that demonstration is going to be the best explanation. You'll notice in the box here, we've got a few fans. So let me pull out one of them. Now you can see here, this is a standard looking intake fan. The rear's got the RGB ring and stuff as well, but it's got this not very nice sort of hub section. Nothing Thermaltake can do about that. However, let's say that you want to have the fan in intake mode. You also get a spare one of these, a spare fan hub, I suppose, but it's the other way around. You can see the blades are reversed. So all you then need to do is pull out the fan hub, and you'll see here we've then got the inverse of what's included in the box. So the Thermaltake logo is the right way round, and of course we're now going to have a fan that blows air this way instead. You then simply line the fan back up over the central hub. You can see it's now going to spin okay, a bit of pressure, it clicks in, and you've now got a fan that operates the opposite way round, but still looks like it was designed from the factory to be this way. So I'll rejoin you in a moment. Let's get the radiator on. The exhaust, the pull fans at the back need to go on first, while the push fans at the front will go on after, creating that radiator sandwich at the front of the case. This case supports massive radiators, and this 360, while not the maximum size, is going to fill up the case nicely and still prevent it from looking too empty. I keep saying case, I do mean frame. This is obviously not closed in on the top, the front, the rear, or even properly on the sides. Add on a drop of thermal paste to the CPU, install the cooler onto the 4 posts, and the whole thing is really starting to come together. Next up on the installation agenda is the graphics card. Now, the 4090 is a pretty chunky boy, and that is where this comes in. It's sort of like a GPU support bracket that's intended for cards mounted in a typical horizontal fashion, but I'm sure that with a bit of luck and ingenuity can be repurposed to meet the needs that we have in this build. Now, I'm going to loosen the 2 screws I've used to just fasten it in and shift the whole thing down so that it doesn't interfere too much, and then we can raise it as we wish to support the card afterwards. The Tough 4090 uses ASUS's really nice Tough design cooler. Look at that. 4090, of course, absolutely huge. And now that I come to think of it, I'm hoping it fits. Oh, easy. Look at that. I have picked up this Thermaltake riser cable, but I think I might have got my measurements a bit wrong, as this looks absolutely... Whoa! What? That is massive. I don't think I'm going to be using this because I didn't quite measure it. Harry, look at this. It's the riser. 1/2 meter. Here we go. Right, so drop the card in, connect the riser up, and then, nice. Oh, yes. All that's left to do then is add in the power. Now, 1350 watts from Thermaltake, plenty of juice in terms of wattage for this build, and it's 80 plus gold certified too. It includes a PCI Gen 5 cable for the top of the graphics card. Nice. And we've also got some cable extensions to go elsewhere in the build. Just having a brief look, and I think that we might need to move this graphics card back a couple of slots so there's enough clearance with the glass panel, but otherwise we're pretty much there, and we can finally boot this PC up and look at performance. But first, the awesome RGB, the LCD displays, and the amazing vertically mounted GPU when this system is turned on for the very first time. Now, we know this system looks good, but do the performance numbers stack up equally as well? Well, we've tested a wide range of titles on this beast of a machine to find out. Starting off with Warzone 2 at 4K high with DLSS set to quality, and this build pulled an impressive 135 FPS on average. With 120 and 103 for the 90 and 99th percentile results, frame rates were consistently high too. Move through to COD's Modern Warfare 2 remastered at 4K high, DLSS once again set to quality, and the build performed equally as well. Slightly higher this time, in fact, with 147 FPS on average. Of course, if more frame rate is what you're after, you could knock the DLSS aggressiveness, if you will, up to performance or balance for even more frame rate. Fortnite at 1080p was next up, and here we did test at competitive settings. Competitive settings is basically when you set everything to low except the render distance, which you tune to far. And boy oh boy, did this settings mix deliver. 310 FPS was a very, very strong average to bring in, with our frame rates in Fortnite consistently incredibly high. Apex also worked well too, as you'd expect, 4K high, and the build pulled in just shy of 200 FPS with 195 frames per second average. And Overwatch 2 also stacked up incredibly well. 4K Ultra in this easier to run title clocked in an impressive 326 FPS on average. This is a build that means business is not going to be for everyone due to its unique design and case, but for those that this build does appeal to, it sure is a sweet config. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to get subscribed. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.